Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast, episode 93 with me, John Loxley. Hope you're doing well out there. This episode of the podcast is with a leader in the addiction recovery and mental health space, Mr. Jesse Harless, who is also the author of the book, If Not You, Then Who? Harness Your Strengths to Shift from Addiction to Abundance. It was an absolutely awesome conversation. He's a really great guy with true integrity when it comes to holistic recovery. And I just hope that you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed speaking with Jesse.
I mean, for me, I start with trauma. So at 4 years old, my dad was an alcoholic. He was addicted to cocaine. He was in the army right around Vietnam, and he got addicted. And when he came back, he met my mother. And he was, somewhat sober at the time when he met my mother. And he started to go to meetings and got a sponsor, but he eventually relapsed back into alcohol and drugs. And when that happened, he lost his job at the post office. And so at 4 years old, my dad was in a car accident, which caused permanent brain damage. He was in a coma for 22 days. And so I lost my dad at 4. He didn't die, but I pretty much lost him as a father at 4. He ended up moving to West Virginia. I didn't see him again. And so at 4, I lost my dad. So that's kind of the original wound of self-abandonment that I started to do to myself. I started to abandon myself because of that abandonment of my dad. I thought if you loved me, you would just abandon me. And I started abandoning myself right up until I was 11 years old. And I found a best friend who eventually moved across town. I had that abandonment. Trauma happened again. And I jumped into my first drug. My first drug was fantasy. So my first drug was fantasy, meaning internet pornography and online games. So I fell into that world, and that's how I numbed out. And I would spend 6 to 8 hours a night numbing out, doing that in a fantasy world, and it impacted everything. When I got to high school, it was really tough. I tried to fit in. I tried to play sports, but eventually, I had a experience of bullying this one year in lacrosse. And then next thing you know, I quit all sports and, I was depressed. I had anxiety, but, that stuff got missed in my family. My mom was a single mom doing her best. She had her own issues. So I just kind of isolated on the computer. I barely graduated high school. And it's when I got to college is when I started to dip into the harder drugs. So I went to college I grew up in a city, and I went to college in a small, basically in the forest. I basically went and hit to school in the forest, and I just dove into drinking alcohol, smoking weed, and then eventually it was pills. Eventually it was mixing all kinds of other things. And then I failed so my first semester, I had every jackpot. I failed every class. I got arrested by a state trooper and charged. I got in trouble in a dorm, had to take alcohol classes, and I got caught for plagiarism. So I literally hit every jackpot you can hit in college, and I had severe consequences for all of it. So I flunked out of college. A year later, my dad passed away, even though we had no relationship. He passed away. And that same night I used cocaine for the first time. That was his drug of choice. And when I used cocaine, I felt love for the first time. I felt what I would describe as love. I felt like what I felt was a coming home experience. And so it was like a spiritual experience. And then I chased that thing for the next 3 years. And so that's what ended up happening is I would go from where I was up living in the country, driving to the city, getting high, coming back to the country to live, to sleep, and did that for a couple of years until I found a way to order prescription opioids myself. And once I found a way to order prescription opioids on the internet, I did this for quite a bit of months. And eventually I was caught, and they let me go, which was interesting. And so after a sting operation with federal agents, they let me go. And I escaped to the warm climate, thought I could fix myself with a geographical cure, got to the warm climate to Florida. And my addiction it was like I revved that engine. I threw the gasoline on the fire. When I got to Florida, it was like my addiction went from 0 to 100. And so it didn't right away because I tried to manage my addiction. And then eventually I fell right back into the same problems I had, much worse. And I lasted about 9-10 months there, came back defeated, overdose experience. And when I got back, I was arrested 2 weeks later. So as soon as I got back home, I was arrested 2 weeks later by the federal agents, facing spending the rest of my 20s in prison. So I was 22 years old, facing 7 years in federal prison. And that's when my life changed.
Wow, that's quite the story. So, what changed, like in that moment, then, when you were facing that kind of long prison sentence? Did they offer you some sort of rehabilitation, or did you make the decision yourself?
They made that decision for me. They basically they told me that I had to go to meetings. I had to go to AA and NA meetings, court ordered. I had to see a drug and alcohol counselor, court ordered. I had to work full time, and I had a mentor. So I didn't go to rehab. I detoxed cold turkey. Never went to rehab. Never went to drug courts. They didn't even have them at the time. And so that was the court's prescription. And so that's what I did. But what ended up happening was, because I was talking to a mentor, he told me about journaling. So now I started to journal every day. And then I learned about affirmations and the power of your conscious language, the power of your self-talk. And I started to watch the words that were coming out of my mouth, because I had panic disorder. So if you've never had panic disorder, it's a horrifying, debilitating diagnosis that you basically feel like you're dying because you're having panic attacks at any point, at any time, with customers, doesn't matter. And so to face that, I thought I could use appreciative self-talk and affirmations to help to combat that. I didn't get on any medication. And so what I started to do is I started to develop new habits. While this court case was pending over my head to go to do the 7 years in prison, I started to journal. I started to do affirmations. I started to build a recovery team. I started to exercise. I started to enroll back into school. I started to go all in on my recovery. And so I was working full time, seeing a therapist, meeting my mentor weekly, doing journaling, doing affirmation. So that led to the court and the judge deciding not to send me to federal prison. So I ended up not going to federal prison. That gave me a lot of hope. And I just continued learning new habits, continue learning, uncovering new trauma, continue to grow, continue to feel the pain. And eventually I started to get successful. I bought my first house at 6 years sober in recovery. I landed I finished my degree. I finished my second degree. I started a business. So I'm speeding up the story, but like now today at 15 years in recovery, all these tools that I learned from the first day of recovery until today, 15 years later, I recorded in my journal. So that book I just wrote is 15 years of data that I synthesized into 30 action steps in the book called the Fears Recovery Toolkit. So that kind of catches us up to speed today, but I'm happy to go anywhere you'd like to go.
Awesome. So talk a bit more about your book, please.
So the book is called If Not You, Then Who? And that book is, so If Not You, Then Who is the book. And then the subtitle is Harness Your Strengths to Move from Addiction to Abundance. And so that is a book that starts out as a memoir. So you get my whole story, as much as I thought was relevant to share. And we all love stories in recovery. That's why we're even on the show right now. It's for the story. And so the memoir, and then the second half is the toolkit. So the first half of the book, story, second half of the book, 5 chapters, is the Fears Recovery Toolkit. So I didn't want to write a memoir. I easily could have wrote a memoir because the story has got really interesting many times. But instead of writing a memoir, I wanted to write a hybrid. I wanted you to hear my story, hear the original traumas, hear the original wounds, see how I came out of that, and then know what tools I'm using today to live my best life. And the tools I'm using today to be an entrepreneur in recovery, the tools I'm using today to teach others to do the same. And that is the Fears Recovery Toolkit in the book.
So today, are you a member of any fellowships, or is this a program that you kind of follow yourself, like independently? What does your recovery look like today?
So my recovery today looks a lot different, right? Than it looked at 1 year, than it looked at 10 years. And that even looked like 2 years ago, because I continue to evolve. I continue to grow. I continue to expand, and I continue to watch millennials die. And so as I see millennials die around me a lot, I start to realize what we have is not working. So I start to look and say, what can we do that's more? What can we do that's more collaborative? So today So I was in Alcoholics Anonymous and for 14 years. And then eventually, with COVID and things that happened, my home group stopped. I stopped going, and I started to really expand upon my book's model, expand upon what I'm doing, and all the people that I can help through this. And so I still speak. I still go to speak at many places. A lot of them are virtual on Zoom. So I think it's a very beautiful thing. And I talk about this in my book about 12-step fellowships and how powerful they are, and how powerful those 12 steps that Bill Wilson synthesized, that other fellowships copied. There's a power in those 12 steps, and it had a profound impact on my life. And I worked them hard for 8 years, and I took many people through that process. But that's only one piece of the pie. The pie is very big. It's holistic. There's many, many aspects of a human. So that's one aspect, but there's many aspects. So connection is critical. So like in the book, I talk about a recovery team. And so having 5 people that you can call when shit's hitting the fan, no matter what. This might not be your mother. This might not be your brother. It's like people. And where do you find people like this? Well, some people find him at 12-step groups, right? Some people find him on intherooms.com. Some people find him at their church. Some people find him at something they're volunteering for. But they find these people they can share their authentic self with. So I basically, my recovery today, what it looks like is I check in with these 5 people on my recovery team every single week. And most of the time, every day, at least 2 of them. And I also help a lot of people through coaching. And I coach people who are in recovery, some people not in recovery. So I do that. I also have a facilitation company that I actually train at sober living homes. So I go into sober living homes and I do workshops for them. And I bring the book, and I go to recovery courts, mental health centers. So my recovery today is obviously very different because I've decided to be an entrepreneur in recovery. So today I do a lot of actions that are based on my purpose. And, my purpose is to elevate the lives of people in addiction recovery who are lost, stuck, and lack direction, to gain clarity and to live a life of purpose. And that includes mental health, people in mental health recovery. So that's my recovery today. If you talked to me 4 years ago, it would be different, but that's what it is today. It's really the Fears Recovery Toolkit in the book. If you read that toolkit, you understand the foundation of my recovery. It's all in that.
Was it 4 years ago when this kind of happened then, or did it happen before that you kind of your recovery almost started to become your day job? Might be the wrong way to put it, but you know what I mean? Like, when did that kind of shift happen?
Yeah, it happened in 2017. So yeah, it was about 4 years ago. In August of 2017, I left my 9-to-5 day job. My 9-to-5 day job was working at Verizon for 14 years. I worked my ass off at that company, and I got to the top. I won awards. I did what I needed to do. When I say I got to the top of my goals, of what I had set for myself. I landed my dream job at that company at the end, and then I still had the hole in the soul. I thought somehow that was going to make me feel fulfilled. I thought I'd be happy when I made the 6 figures. I thought I'd be happy when I had the toys. And I realized that I was only making me feel worse. So in 2017, I surrounded myself with entrepreneurs. I had a coach that I found in 2015. So I got a coach. I surrounded myself with entrepreneurs, and many of them were entrepreneurs in recovery. So it was very niche. It was very specific. So I was learning from very successful entrepreneurs in recovery, and it fascinated me. It fascinated me that someone like me, who's rebellious, who loves to go his own way, who loves to co-create his own path, that there's other people like that, and they're very successful that are in recovery. So I started to study these entrepreneurs in recovery, and I found out that I could do this myself. I could actually do this myself. And in August of 2017, I left my job to start what I called Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And that was to coach people. That was to facilitate change at these treatment centers, to facilitate change at sober living homes, all of the environments of recovery and drug courts, all of that. And that's what I did. And it was hard. The struggle was real in the beginning. It was hard to make money. But eventually I figured out how to do it. I figured out a model that worked, and eventually designed my own models. And so that's when it did start about 4 years ago.
Cool. It's interesting because I'm having this conversation with you, and first and foremost, a lot of your story mirrors my story massively. The panic attacks. I was having the panic attacks. I was in the kind of highly paid sales job for 10 years, and then started to have the panic attacks, realized that I needed to make a life change, and left that job and basically went and moved abroad, and kind of tried to figure out what my life's purpose was. That led me into a helping role, but at the same time it kind of was running parallel to my DJ career, because I'd been a DJ for many years before, and then that had ended due to my alcoholism and my addictions. But I'd got back into the DJing, and I had exactly the same experience of you, where I reached my goals and still had the hole in the soul. And I was I played this gig, and it was kind of like the biggest gig I think I'd ever played. Really, I was in the main room of the event that I was playing at. I was on a stage, on an elevated stage above the crowd, and I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. it's just not fulfilling me anymore. And it was a relief, but it was like a really horrible moment as well, because I thought, God, I've spent so many years, trying to achieve this, and now I've achieved it. It's not what I want. So from that point onwards, I kind of like really concentrated on my recovery and everything to do with that. And hence the podcast that we're talking on was born out of that decision. I've written a few books myself. I've self-published a few books, but I've just got one published that'll be coming out next year. So
What's the name of it?
It's called All Is One: The Science and Spirituality of Consciousness. Because I've always concentrated on the spiritual malady aspect of the illness has been my kind of main focus. And when it comes to kind of like, I've always recognized that there's a huge barrier in recovery for people that come in that either think it's religious or don't jive with the kind of spiritual aspect. So I've been very, very interested in trying to approach recovery from almost a scientific perspective as well, and trying to show how the two things can work hand in hand. It doesn't have to be science versus spirituality. Often the spiritual and the scientific are saying the same thing. So that's kind of what the book is about. And the messages are very kind of recovery oriented. But the reason why I've told that story is because I've come to a place where I have this internal battle going on all the time. And what the battle is I hate trying to promote myself, because I feel as though it taps into all the ego stuff, and it taps into that almost the kind of similar journey that I went through with the DJing. And then on the other hand, I feel as though I can't just relinquish it and let it go, because my initial aim was to try to help people. And, whether it's one person or 5,000 people that are listening to this podcast, I have absolutely no idea. All I know is that somebody out there will probably get something from this conversation. So that's what's kind of kept me going. But yeah, I'm reaching another point where I'm kind of like, I need to make a decision as to whether I kind of do what you've done, which is kind of, really go for it and make this aspect of my life become, my main focus really, or whether I relinquish that to live a kind of normal, in inverted commas, life. Do you know what I mean? It's a difficult question. And just to add to that, I also work in the substance misuse field as well. So it's not like I don't have a day job that isn't meaningful, and I do enjoy my job. But at the same time, that's my job, and this is what I love to do.
What would you do if the money wasn't an option? You could do anything you want right now. What would it be?
Oh yeah, definitely this. Yeah.
You'd be doing the podcast full time and
I'd be doing
building systems.
Yeah, I'd be doing everything that's related to the podcast. So I mean, the three kind of having aspects of my, my kind of like life and recovery stuff is writing books, doing the podcast, and life coaching as well. Because I've just become a certified life coach, and I've just taken on my first kind of few clients. So that is, yeah. So that's kind of like what I would be doing.
How long until you're all in on that and you don't have to work the day job?
Well, it's just in its infancy really at the moment. I mean, the podcast has been running for 2 years. The life coaching just happened as a result of the pandemic. And the books, I've been writing books for about 5 years. So I would say, if I totally focused on it, you could probably look at, a year to 2 years maybe.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. I know you could do it for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that the question always remains, though, do I think that, like, I suppose what it boils down to is there's a certain level of not fame, but you're a known person in the field that you're in. So your achievements mean that you become more and more well known, and that's something that I'm actually quite scared of. Like, initially when I first started doing the podcast and writing the books, I did it under a pseudonym because I was worried that the ego would take over and it would become more about me than it was about the work. So how do you kind of mitigate that? Or is that never been a problem for you?
No, well, sometimes the ego is just the wound itself. And we think it's the ego, which is part of the wound itself. But we're not realizing that's our own underlying causal traumas. And once we start to really take a hard look at that, we realize we're actually being selfish. That if we did go all in and live our purpose to the fullest, there's nothing to do with ego with that. That is actually service to others. So I think that that's taking a hard look at, like, what do you really stand for? Because I know what I stand for and I know what my values are. And my value is not to make millions of dollars. Because if I made millions of dollars, people know where it would go. I would build holistic treatment centers utilizing quantum and all the things I'm learning about holistic healing and trauma healing into the treatment centers. So when I get that money, I'm going to invest into that. But for now, as being in year 3.5, I'm 3.5 years into entrepreneurship, today it's really about spreading the message of the book, because the book is a 10-year book. It's been in me for 10 years. And in 2018, I got serious about it. And then when the pandemic hit, I took 10 months and I wrote it every day and I got it done. And that's a legacy. That book is my legacy. I mean, yeah, I'll write another book as I learn about more esoteric things. But this book is the book that I wanted to share with people, to say that it's not just one way. Recovery is massively holistic. In fact, more people find recovery through natural recovery than any fellowship. 12-step fellowships are small in comparison to the overall spectrum of recovery and addiction. So a lot of people don't know that because we get into bubbles of recovery. We think it's only this way, but the reality, it's so massive. And so for me, I just want to do my part while I'm here to impact as many lives as possible. My mission when I started in 2017 was to impact the lives of 5,000 men and women. But now I've done that. So now it's like, okay, now I want to really spread the message. And it's selfish for me not to spread the message. It's actually selfish for me to play small. That's not what God put me here for. It was for me to shine my light, to give this second chance that I've been given and show others it's possible. So by me playing small, it serves nobody. In fact, it actually harms people. So that's how I look at it. It's not ego a lot of times, it's often the wounded self. And so taking a hard look at how can I honor my true essence and really do what I'm here to do and work on my traumas of unworthiness, my traumas of not feeling lovable, all these core traumas. And once you get over that, that's when you start to go, wow. And you start to vibrate into new potential opportunities that were never there. You can't give away something you don't have. So as you do that deeper healing on yourself, then you start to literally create opportunities that were impossible to get before. So that's what I've learned in the last 3.5 years, is like the way I was doing it in 2017 and 2018, that wouldn't work at all now. So now I'm doing things differently and it's working really well, but I had to take the risk. I had to get out of my comfort zone. I had to face my fears. And one of my mentors, Janai, says that what's in the way is the way. What's in the way is the way. So it's not about running around, protecting, controlling, avoiding, using your ego to like navigate everything. It's going right after it. It's going after it. It's healing those deeper levels of trauma. It's asking for help. It's doing the work, the deeper levels of work. And then really then you get really clear on what you're about. And you wake up every day and you go, today, it's going to be a good day because today I'm going to live my best life. I'm going to do self-care on myself. and I'm going to just go out there and try to help people no matter who they are. Doesn't matter if they're in addiction recovery or not. Everyone's in recovery now after the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic. Everyone's in recovery.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean, my friend. It's really going inwards, the inward journey, and looking at your heart and saying, okay, I'm going to do this. And if I fail, who cares? I've already ruined my life several times. So what am I going to do now? Like fail? Like, what does even that mean? That's going to be awesome because I get to like rebuild again because I'm like in recovery, right? So it's really playing out all the tapes in the head that say, but what if I do this? But what if I do this? And what if this coaching client quits? And what if the book flops? And what if play it all out? And at the end of the day, it's like, holy shit, my life is still better than it's ever been ever. And I might as well go for it because if I fail, I'll just go back to the job. So that's where it has to get to, where you can't be afraid of death. You can't be afraid of failure. You got to go to that place in yourself, but it takes more work. It takes more work to go the deeper levels. And the deeper levels might come with finding someone you can work with. It could be a therapist, it could be a good recovery coach, but someone that you can go there with, share your dreams with, share that trauma with, and then really realize like, oh my God, the only thing that's stopping me and ever was stopping me was me. It wasn't the government. It wasn't the laws. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't the bully. It's me.
Yeah.
So then so that just takes a lot of questions, asking good questions in contemplation during your meditative practices in the morning, or maybe before bed. Take time to journal and asking yourself what matters most, what matters most, what matters most. And if what matters most is serving the people and serving the people at a much greater capacity than just a couple people at a meeting or whatever, which is all used. But if it really is to be getting your voice on the show, writing the books, doing the coaching, then you got to eventually ask yourself, what if I just did that 2 months from now instead of 2 years from now? Because the world is moving at a fast pace right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are dying. So you have to ask yourself, I'm not here to be a savior, but I'm here to do my part, to use my gifts, to harness those strengths to move from addiction to abundance. Literally, like it's about showing people that abundance is just breathing. Abundance is nature. Abundance is the food in your fridge. That's abundance. And if you already have that, you're way ahead of the game. And so it's just getting clear to like, let me go in and do this. And then that negative self-talk will creep in, of course, but that's why you build a recovery team to help you to keep that vision continuing forward.
Yeah. So what was holding you back before you made that decision to, for this to be the main focus? What was the things that were holding you back initially?
Programming. So programming, I had to unlearn a lot of things. So it was my programming, my thought, my false beliefs. So I thought that like what would bring me happiness is if I stayed at my company for 20 years, became the vice president of the company, get all this acclaim and money, and like really was doing it big and all this stuff. And what I realized is like, that's not what I want at all. Like that doesn't even matter anymore. So it started to, and like I said, I actually achieved the goal. I actually got to the dream job. And so I actually like, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's integrity. So I actually got the dream job. I was in it. In 6 months, I'd be sitting at lunchtime and I'd be so like, I don't want to say depressed, but I would be like unhappy. I would go into meditation and I'd just be like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this is not what I'm here to do. And it was a scary moment, but it was that crossroad that I realized I was programming myself into this belief that would not lead to happiness. It was only leading to service to self. And it was only leading towards ultimately unhappiness and even ill health. So that's when it started. The seed started to be planted in 2015. In 2015, I still had severe anxiety. I had got rid of most of the panic attacks because I dedicated my life to doing that. And I have a master's in mental health counseling. So I did everything I could to study how to overcome this stuff. But I still had severe anxiety, and I found cold showers to be a huge catalyst to overcome my anxiety. And so the cold shower practice got me out of my comfort zone, and I did it every day. And it helped me to really step up to the plate and take chances I never would have taken. And that led to me finding a mastermind, and that mastermind of entrepreneurs helped me to gain the confidence for me to believe that if I could make $1 million for this company, I could probably make like 4 or 5,000 for myself every month. I was just going to guess that. So that's what I did. I took a bet on myself instead of taking a bet on someone else's dream that they built. And so I started taking a bet on my own dream, and it worked out. It was a lot too, of course, a lot of struggle, but it worked out.
Thank you for that. Was the cold showers as in the Wim Hof method? Is that the same thing?
I didn't find the Wim Hof method till later on. This was more of an intuitive friend came to me and said, "Hey, you should start taking cold showers." And I live in New Hampshire in December, and it was freezing out. It was 34 degrees Fahrenheit. So I took a cold shower, and I didn't know anything about Wim Hof breathing or any of that. I just did it on my own, and I developed my own breathing. And eventually, the anxiety went away. I quit caffeine. Like, I overcame things that were impossible in recovery. Caffeine's the accepted drug of choice in recovery. And I was able to, overcome all this stuff. And I'm like, this is wild. And the cold showers was a big catalyst.
And sugar as well. Yeah.
Well, I went raw vegan for a whole year. So I went raw vegan for a whole year where I just ate raw foods for a freaking year. So like, you could say I did quit sugar because I was just eating raw foods.
Do you eat it now or not? No sugar or?
Well, I tried to today. I still try to eat high raw. So I try to eat high raw because that changed my life. I did a 40-day juice fast, and then I went raw vegan for a year. It changed everything. It literally transformed my mind and my heart because I got stuff out of my body that shouldn't have been in there. And I was already a healthy person. And stuff came out of my body during this detoxification process that is unexplainable. So I'm like, and I felt the best I ever felt. I felt natural highs. If I was operating at a 7, I was now operating at a 9 just from the diet, just from eating. So I started to, now today, I eat plant-based, but I'm high raw. So like today, the only thing I've had so far was cold pressed orange juice and a smoothie. And that's all I have for the next couple more hours. So like, I'm good on that. And that's, so it really changed my whole eating schedule, which really boosted my energy. And now my energy is just the highest it's ever been. I don't need vitamins. I don't need supplements. Like, it's just, so it's really a profound taking that journey, the raw journey, and learning about true detoxification. And once I learned about that, it had a profound effect on me and the people that I work with.
Is that something that you kind of teach people then? The diet as well?
Yeah, I incorporate that into the coaching. My coaching model is very holistic. It touches upon many different areas, and one of them is naturopathic medicine, which is also includes true detoxification. Yeah.
What is kind of like, moving forward, what is the greater vision for your company? And for, obviously you said that this is a book that's taken you 10 years to write, and you're pretty sure that you'll write another one, but I'm presuming that now is the time that you're going to be capitalizing on what you've written and growing your company. So what does the next kind of 5 years look like for you?
Well, I think the next year is going to be me. I have a training that I started to develop in 2018. And this training, I took over a dozen people through this training. And this training was to help people become facilitators. So not teachers, facilitators, where they could go into any organization, any sober home, any YMCA, anywhere, and be able to run workshops and really make impact. Because I learned the art of facilitation from a company called Exchange. And when I learned the art of facilitation, I ended up applying it and adapting it to my life experiences, which were mental health and addiction recovery, and it eventually became entrepreneurship. So this training that I started developing in 2018, I was going to go all in 2020, and then COVID hit. So I was about to go all in on that training. COVID hit. I totally nixed it. I got rid of it. And now in 2021, I'm about to relaunch this. So this is a training that teaches people done for you package workshops that you can deliver tomorrow at your company at your organization, at a sober living home, at a drug court, at a treatment center, because they've already been to all these places. I have dozens of testimonials of training people doing this. I've done it in these places. So it's done for you workshops that are 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and 2 hours long that you can go plug and play right now with the workbook, everything. So that's what I'm actually working on right now. I actually had a call before this to design the 1.0 version of a course that I'm going to create as well, because I'm going to do a live version and a course. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And I think that's kind of the next 2 to 5 years. But I'm also going to expand the fears model. So the fears recovery toolkit in the book is something that I'm also going to expand out. And that's going to expand into a course and might even expand into a fears recovery coaching. So it might have a coaching model component to it, because I bring the toolkit in the book. I actually use it in the coaching and my coaching that I do with the clients. So I had other models I was using from other people I learned from, other certifications I learned from coaching, but I like using my own model. So now I'm using my own model. And so that's the next 5 years is teaching people to become facilitators at a high level, to be very successful when they do that and bring in their own content as they're facilitating. So it's not my content. It's actually their content. I just have the structure that they can use. Yeah. And then it's really building out the fears model and going from there. And I'm writing another book again. So I've already started the next book. So it's books change you as a person. So like this next book, I can already tell it's like, I don't know where it's going to take me, because it's more spiritual in nature. It's more esoteric. So yeah, man. So I'm not sure. Oh. I'm just in motion every day.
You sound like you sound extremely, extremely busy. What's your family situation, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I'm actually single. So I actually don't have kids. So I have brothers who have kids, and, so I know my best friends have kids and they own businesses. So I know how the struggle is real when you have kids and a family. So I'm very grateful that I'm able to dedicate more time to coaching, to more time to designing and writing. And I don't take that for granted. But by the way, that's no excuse though. My mentors all have 2 to 3 kids, and they not only do what I do, they run multiple businesses. So I can't say that just because I have all this time, and someone could use that and say, oh, that's why he can do all this. Actually, you can't use this, because I can name 3 mentors right now that have 3 kids, 2 kids, and they do what I do and then double that. So, so it's all perspective. And so I am flying solo at the moment.
It's the reason why I asked the question, and I do appreciate the answer that you gave there around people that do have kids as well. One of the barriers for me for focusing heavily on anything that I do is my family, because I've got 3 kids myself. I've got 2 stepchildren and I've got a baby daughter. And obviously I've got a partner, and my parents live close by, and her parents are heavily involved in our lives. And what I've found is that when I go for something, like as an example, writing the book that is due to be published in May next year, I was working with a life coach. I met a life coach through this podcast, and he's now become a really, really close friend. And when I was working with him, he helped me to focus, because I was like, I wanted to get the book finished and get it out to publishers within, I think I said 6 months, and it was done within 2 months. And then I found a publisher within 2 weeks, so it was like super, super fast. But the amount of focus and effort I put into making that happen was like intense. And when it was finished, when the process was finished, and I was kind of like, right, I've achieved what I set out to achieve. I said to it, it's Dennis's call, so shout out to Dennis Berry. I said to Dennis, I need a break. Like I can't sustain this level of, I suppose it borders on obsession, doesn't it? Like when you're really, really focused with something and you're doing it every single day, for me anyway, it borders on the kind of obsessive. And I just said, like, I can't run at this level constantly. So I needed to take a bit of time to kind of like regroup and then focus on the next thing. How do you deal with that? I mean, I know you're single, so obviously you're not beholden to anyone, but how do you kind of manage that side of yourself?
Well, I've always had a life coach. So I think that's really important, is the life coach you want to find someone who's going to meet you where you're at. You want to give them your goals. What's your 1-year plan, your 3-year vision? What are you about? What are your values? What do you stand for? Find someone that can meet you where you're at, where you want to be. So I've been working with a coach since 2015, and I never will not have a coach at this point. I just cannot not see that. And so today, my coach I work with today is very different to the one I had, 3 years ago when I left my job, or 3.5 years ago. But that's what really keeps me in line, is like talking to someone who's neutral. That's not a friend. That's just like, hey, what's your hopes and dreams? And they keep you accountable to that. So I think that's really powerful. And I think I've learned this from my mentors. My mentors have shown me this. And I talk about this in the book about building not only your recovery team, but your mentors. Who are your mentors? And you might have 50 mentors by the time you die. You may have 1,000, but who are those people? And it could be a coach too. So that's how I keep in a structured balance. As I've learned, I'm very organized too, by the way. When I was facing 7 years in federal prison, I had to get organized. And so the greatest gift I got from that was incredible organization skills, because I was facing so much pressure. They really wanted to make an example to put me away for what I did in the state. So I had to really get organized, and that still carries into today. So I'm a very organized person. So when I combine organization to having a daily to-do planner with coaching for myself, that really helps me to stay on track, to make things realistic, so that I can have goals and I don't beat myself up. And that person meets me along the journey, because I'm a highly sensitive person too. So I don't want someone who's this masculine, you got to get it done, you're a piece of, you can do it. Like, I don't need that. I just need someone that meets me where I'm at. We can both be intelligent. They can respect my sensitivities, and we can really flourish together. And that's the type of coaches I have, because I had other types of coaches too that were like that. So I had to evolve myself and find people that work with me. So I think really working with someone is really helpful. And, and I think that's what really keeps me on track, is like, what really keeps me on track is my purpose. But what really, when I check in with that coach, even if it's once a month, it just reminds me of like, oh yeah, I'm on the right path. I'm doing the things I need to do. And, cause I want to have a family. So it's not like I'm partying every night and I'm going to the beach. No, man, I'm working hard every day so that when I meet that person, I can provide for that family and do the things I need to do. So like, so I think just having that accountability of someone to keep you accountable is really, really powerful. That's what's helped me. That's what helped my mentors. I just learned from what they did. I just asked a lot of questions and learned a lot.
Yeah, I think it is hugely important, isn't it, to have people ahead of you that you can speak to, that have been where you want to be. Like,
yeah, every day.
Without that, it's very difficult to gauge. Like you said, difficult to gauge whether you're on the right path, whether you're on the path that you initially set out on as well.
Yeah, some of the mentors that I'm literally like in weekly, like trying to stay in their atmosphere every week. I mean, they have 3 kids, you know what I'm saying? And they're busy. They have like multiple companies. They have 12 books. They have like triple my responsibilities, and they do it all. So it's kind of like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I see where I could be heading, having a couple kids and then still doing this at the highest levels possible, and maintaining my relationship to my wife, and having be the best possible father I can, and having the best health of my life. So living a truly abundant life. And so I know it's possible. That's why I surround myself with those people of where I want to be in 5 years and 10 years.
When it regards to the food, because I mean, I've spoken a lot on this podcast about my own struggles with food over the years, specifically sugar addiction. I mean, that's been the main thing. Obviously I'm fully aware that it really boils down to making a decision and obviously sticking to it. But how did you manage to give up the things that you love, so to speak, and move forward on the food front? How did it work?
A lot of people avoid pain, and a lot of people go for pleasure, and they live in that cycle every day, and it can go on for 30 years. But there's got to come a point in time where you really take a hard look and say, if I really want to stop taxing my endocrine system, if I really want to stop taxing my kidneys, my adrenal glands, I want to live my best life, then you have to make a sacrifice. And the sacrifice is going to be giving up the things you love for a little bit of time. And when you do that, you start to change your taste buds. You start to change your actual neural biology. You will actually create a new baseline. And so when you start to do that, the decision becomes easy not to do it. But you have to sacrifice. And it could be a 40-day sacrifice. It could be a 3-month sacrifice, but you have to do it, because then you get to go through that detoxification process. But on the other side of it is everything you want, because you end up seeing that, holy moly, I don't even want to eat that gluten bread. I don't even want to pick up that cake over there, because you realize that instead of eating that cake that's full of trans fats and sugar and GMO, possibly all this stuff, I could actually just make a bomb ass smoothie with incredible dates that actually tastes way better, and I feel better. So you start to realize you can substitute delicious snacks that are healthy for those ones that you would have grabbed before out of addiction or numbing out. But you have to go through the pain first. There's no skipping that process. And so you have to go through some sacrifice where you're going to make a commitment and say, hey, you know what, for the next 30 or 40 days, I'm not going to do this, but I'm also not going to be extreme where I'm going to fail, because we set ourselves up for failure most of the time. We literally go from like 0 to 100. We go from like eating cheeseburgers, standard American diet every day, to then going, I'm going to go raw vegan. We go from one extreme to the next, and it's not going to be sustainable. In fact, it could be dangerous. So we want to just gradually have health be a gradual, unless you have stage 4 cancer. This is a different conversation, right? If you have a terminal illness, we have a different conversation right now. But if you're at where you're at and you're just like, hey, you know what? No, I just want to feel better, because your food impacts your mood. There's literally medicine in the food, but not in the food that's processed, not in the food that's going to be GMO. So we have to make conscious food choices. We have to say to ourselves, okay, what's the food that's going to help me to live till 110? We got to start asking ourselves that question. Not a diet, not a quick fix. We need to ask ourselves, what's going to get us over the 100 mark? And we have to be honest with ourselves. And when we do that, not a quick fix to gain some muscle mass or to starve ourselves. No. We have to find a way that's sustainable. But the only way to do that is through experimentation. And so you need to try different things. And in my book, I talk about this, and I talk about the 2-week plant-based trial, where I'm not saying you have to go vegan. I'm just saying for 2 weeks, I want you to go vegan. I want you to cut out all that stuff, and I want you just to eat vegan. I'm not talking about vegan pizzas either. I'm talking like eat mostly fruits and vegetables. And I'm talking like do that for 2 weeks, and then every day journal and track it, and get the Chronometer app. Start to track how you feel. Your food impacts your mood. So track how you feel after you eat your meal. After you drink a smoothie, you make a juice, you make some bomb ass salad with some avocado dressing. How do you feel after that? And then, if you slip and you cheat on it or something, and you eat a large cheese pizza with buffalo wings, write down how you feel. Be honest with yourself. And then you'll start to see like, man, you know what? I got to get out of this addiction. I really have addiction to food. And so when you start to set yourself a goal, don't make it overwhelming. Set it for 2 weeks and then do some journaling. But a lot of times what we need is accountability, my friend. And that's why it's really hard to do this stuff a lot of times on our own. I've done a lot of stuff on my own because I'm built like that. I do a lot of things on my own because I just built like that. But a lot of people are not. People need the accountability. And I needed it for some things, but for many things I don't. I can do cold showers for 5 years straight. I can quit drugs and alcohol cold turkey, not go to rehab. That's not normal. I don't know why God gave me. Well, I don't know why I built like that, but that's why I'm here to help others to learn what they can learn, to learn that when I do have accountability, it's even better. It's even better. So find someone you can do a 30-day challenge with. Find an accountability partner where you say, let's do a 2-week juice fast. Let's do a 2-week juice fast. Let's start with that. And then from there, let's break the juice fast with just eating fruit. And then eventually let's bring in some avocados and smoothies, and let's really commit to 30 days and see what happens and not give up on ourselves. And then see how you feel during that 30 days and after. And if you feel the best you've ever felt in your life, which is what happened to me, because I was eating all the diets, man. I did them all. I did all these different diets. And I can tell you, I learned a lot. And so when I really started to find out wow, what I eat to live instead of live to eat. And I'm eating things that are higher nutritional value, denser foods that are really good for me, like fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, smoothies, juices. I literally show up differently for my clients. I show up differently for my family. And I have to really take a hard look to like, am I really showing up to the people I serve as my best version of myself? And does food really impact that? And it does. So that's where I had to just get honest with myself. And it was sacrifice, man. The things that I had to do and give up, it was not easy, but my health and wellness are my number one priorities. So this is why you have to draw the line in the sand. And it's not going to be easy at times. And you might fail, but you get back to it and you keep doing it. And so that's kind of the best advice I could say is start small, do a 2-week thing, and then do a 21 day and then do a 30 day and just see how you feel. Write it down because you're going to feel like shit many times because you're detoxifying years of eating crappy, and so you have to feel the pain, go through that. And then on the other side of that, you'll start to see like, oh my God, like my depression, anxiety is starting to go away. In fact, I didn't even know I had depression, anxiety, but when I started eating this way, I feel better than ever. And I don't get that feeling that I had before because you change your baseline.
Yeah. Interestingly, as you were talking there, I was recognizing that is part of the thing, actually, I think that holds me back from, really going for it when it comes to making the whole recovery stuff my kind of profession, because I think that listening to you with what you just said there, you've got a very high level of integrity. And I feel as though, you wouldn't go, I wouldn't pay any attention to a guy that's just said what you've said there if he was 16 stone. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, this guy, he says what he's doing, he is practicing what he's preaching. And I think if you're going to be, taken seriously and you're going to have true integrity when it comes to all this stuff, you need to be doing it. You really need to be practicing what you're preaching, I feel.
Yeah. And it's progress, not perfection too, because like I did the raw vegan thing for a while and that shit was hard, but it was also the best thing I ever did, best decision I've made for my health. And, now today, man, I go and I'll have some goodies, some vegan goodies, I'm living it up, but I know the fundamentals. I know the foundation, and I always come back to that foundation, and that can never be taken from me now. Yeah. You can't be talked to about health. You can't be told about health. You need to experience it. You need to feel what it feels like. And, I could say a lot about it, but I'm just, it's just get started now and, get started, buy a $150 juicer, $100 juicer, like buy a blender, like start this thing, and start and get a plan together and commit to that plan. And on the other side of that, these things that we challenge ourselves to is really our best life. And that's what I found. And I love doing 30-day challenges because, they say it takes 21 days to start to create a habit, but I don't really think that's true. I actually think it takes 6 months, but in 30 days, you might be able to lock down some nice foundational things because you started to feel a different way. And I
want to jump.
And it's sustainable.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump on something that you said then as well, actually, because I really liked what you said, that you can't teach somebody about this stuff, like they have to experience it. And the reason why I wanted to jump on that is because it's a theme that's been running through what you've been talking about. I feel the same way about that you can't teach somebody about a higher power or God either. It's something that you have to experience. And you said, you've mentioned, God made you this way a few times. A question that's been burning right from the very, very beginning of when you started talking. You said that your dad went to, I think it was Vietnam, you said, did you? And he came back traumatized. Is that right?
Well, he didn't actually fight in Vietnam, but he was in the army during that time. He was stationed in a different place, but he got addicted to drugs during that time. Yeah. So
the question I was going to ask around that stuff is, was your dad prior to being in the army, I know obviously I understand that you didn't have a relationship with him after you were 4, so you might not know the answer to this question, but do you know whether or not he already had his own trauma, or whether it was the trauma of the army that set off his addictions?
Well, his brothers were alcoholics too. So it
Okay.
runs in his family. So I definitely think there was trauma. I never got to learn about, that side of the family much. Just all my uncles died of alcoholism too. They've died of severe. So my dad died of alcoholism. On his death certificate, it says cause of death, alcoholic. So, it's ravaged my family addiction. So like his side, his brothers, my uncles were alcoholics. And so, and on my mom's side, her brother's an alcoholic. So it just really ravaged both sides, which is really interesting. And so, so there was definitely some core traumas that I'm sure he went through. And, when he was in the army, he was shooting up, and he caught hepatitis C, and there's shame from that. So yeah, and then like he met my mom, who's this person who wasn't like partying. And then like he got his act together. He started going to meetings, and then he relapsed. So I never get to know my dad because he was in that accident. So, I can ask his sister, because now his sister's been in my life, and I get to ask her, and she's given me all his stuff. And that's why I had his death certificate. And, she tells me about his life, and, because he drank himself to death. So, it was a sad life. So yeah, man, I'm sure there was original traumas. And I know this from the work I'm doing and the work I've studied under, Peter Levine and Gabor Mate and these guys. We got to really look at the pain. We got to ask ourselves, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. We got to start asking better questions to people, and maybe starting with ourselves. Because I'm 15 years into this, man, and I'm doing the deepest levels of trauma healing I've done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally, absolutely on board with all that. And I think that, interestingly, actually, when I wrote my first book, Addiction Prevention, I looked into the case studies around the soldiers that came back from the Vietnam War. And it turned out that those who went over there and had no pre-existing trauma in their life still took drugs, still injected heroin, but didn't get addicted to it.
Yes.
Those that did have trauma came back and continued that habit, which
Yeah.
says it all, really, doesn't it? I mean, it's. I mean, my take on addiction, and I don't know whether you've got a slightly different view, but my take on addiction is that you can actually boil it down very, very simply to an inability to manage one's own emotions, because I feel as though the lack of kind of emotional intelligence that we have, and this is on a gradient, obviously, in society, can lead to mental health issues, which people attempt to medicate with substances and behaviors. And that is as simple as I believe it needs to be. How about yourself?
I love that definition. Absolutely. I mean, my definition keeps evolving. And I think that's what's really important, is that our definition keeps evolving as we evolve. And I think what you just said is now being incorporated into my definition, because that's the truth. Is we don't often we bottle up our emotions. We don't feel our feelings, and that's what's these are the causal wounds that are causing this wounded self to run our lives. And I think, and it comes from emotions. So yeah, absolutely. And that's something I wasn't taught in the program. I wasn't taught in the 12 steps. I wasn't taught anywhere. Not even my therapist told me about that. I didn't even know. It wasn't until I found certain people and certain books that I started to realize that the root cause of a lot of this is, like you said, it comes down to emotion and emotional wounds, and those get trapped in the body, and that trauma stays stored in the body, and it can stay in your whole life. And so a lot of times that's what's playing out in someone's life is those traumas. And so but they originate with emotions and feelings of abandoning ourselves, because we didn't get the love we needed when we were kids. Yeah. So when we didn't get the love we needed, we started to make up a story about ourselves that we're not going to be okay. And that's where the stuff started to originate. And so I'm right with you. And that's the type of research I'm doing now. And I'm really thinking about my next book is like, I want to go really deep into intuition and trauma. Like I want to go into intuition and different modalities of healing and getting to these new, basically I'm a self-scientist. So when I do stuff on myself, I share it with the people. And so that's what I'm doing in this next book, is really studying these deeper levels of feelings and emotions, and how I still operate at times addictively, even though I don't have a substance. I have other addictions of numbing out, controlling behaviors, avoiding behaviors that are still running my life. So that's where I couldn't see that until I got to a certain level of healing. And then eventually the book arrived at, the teacher arrives when just at the right time. And then I started to read about this stuff and I was like, oh my God, I got more work to do. That's beautiful. So I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at it like, and when you start to do that, like I said, you start to attract new opportunities, new people in your life. And that's what's been happening. It's been really beautiful. So, avoiding pain it might be one of the greatest addictions on the planet, is avoiding pain.
Yeah. Well, I can highly recommend for your next book that you check out the Fellowship Emotions Anonymous, which
cool.
I'd never even heard of. And recently my partner joined that fellowship. And as a result of her transformation, I have joined it myself and have been attending meetings. And I can honestly say that my level of self-awareness just through doing, I think I'm on my sixth meeting or my sixth week of meetings, has just been staggering, really. I mean, because I've kind of what I said earlier a couple of moments ago about, I always used to call it emotional disorder. So I'll say emotional disorder leads to mental health issues and unmanageable thinking, and then we manage that with substances and behaviors. And I'd been saying for years, I wish there was a fellowship that just concentrated on emotions. And then hey presto, there is, and it's been around since the 70s. So I've missed a trick. I've missed a trick.
I didn't even know this, man. If we did this podcast before I released the book, I would have included that in the book. I didn't even ever heard of this Emotions Anonymous. So I'm gonna check this out, man. I appreciate that. I think the work I'm doing today is all about emotions and feeling the feeling. So yeah. I'm gonna check this out, and that's a gift. Thank you.
Just before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you the crucial question that I ask of all my guests, which is, what does life in recovery mean to you?
Well, life in recovery to me means living an abundant life, living a full life and reaching my full potential.
Beautiful. And what's the one piece of advice that you'd give to anybody that was listening to this that might be struggling or looking for a change?
Your story matters. No matter where you are, no matter what you've done, nothing is wasted. Your story matters. You matter. We want to hear your story. So reach out to one of us, tell us your story, because it matters and someone needs to hear it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jesse. Where can we find you online? Can you just give us your online details, please?
Yeah, so you can go to Instagram, Jesse Harless 222, or you could go to jesseharless.com. You could check out my stuff on that website.
Wonderful. Well, there'll be a link to your website underneath the show notes, but it's been a real pleasure talking to you today, Jesse, and I'd love to stay in touch and maybe do this again sometime. Yeah, please. Absolutely, John. This is a pleasure. Thank you very much. Take care and have a wonderful day. All right, you too, my friend. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see a range of mutual aid organisations in the show notes. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.